and welcome to Dregs of Wisdom with Andrew Tanner.
Hey everyone, welcome to Dregs of Wisdom. We have a special episode for you today. Friend of the show, Chris Berlin, is back, but also a special guest, Eileen Moncoeur from the Sabal Foundation. We're here today because I haven't done a podcast actually in 2 months. Ever since the yoga festival, we were taking time off. And Chris sent me an email about this foundation and he's doing a benefit concert, and, I'm going to raise money for the Sabal Foundation. And I get a lot of people sending me stuff about raising money for this and that. Not trying to put a damper on things, but this is just the reality of my life. There's a lot of people I know who are trying to do wonderful things in the world, and I often ignore them or politely decline them for various reasons. But I watched the little YouTube video that you sent. There's a 10-minute and a 4-minute documentary on Sabal Foundation. We will have a link to it in the show notes. In fact, if you're watching this right now, you can stop what you're doing and watch that. It's amazing. It is what convinced me. I literally had my heart moved and was like, okay, I have to do something. I have to help. And I want to bring these people on. And I'm curious because there are so many problems in the world, and there's so many ways in which we could help the world. But maybe, I found myself being moved by what the work of the Sabal Foundation. And Eileen, maybe as the executive director of the foundation, maybe you could talk a little bit. First, please introduce yourself and share, why did you get so inspired to do this work? And maybe just briefly, what is the Sabal Foundation for those who are unaware?
Oh, thank you so much, Andrew. And thank you for inviting me on. I've watched a few of your podcasts, and it's really an honor to be here with you and with Chris.
Awesome.
So the Sabal Foundation is, it's supporting an organization in Nepal that does free surgery and rehabilitation for the poorest kids with disabilities. And I think what's so meaningful to me about that is that, in Nepal, disability in particular is considered karma for sins committed in a past life. And so the kids that are very poor, about 80% of the population lives on $2 a day or less. So there's extreme poverty, and kids that are born or become disabled in these families, they have no chance at having a life other than suffering. And even within their villages and their families, they're ostracized. Many of them are beaten, they're abused. And what's so remarkable for me is that there's an organization there. There's two surgeons who create this transformative moment in these kids' lives. So I feel like I'm wandering all over the place.
No, I think you're mentioning Dr. Banskota. Am I saying his name right?
Yes.
He is what shook me when I watched the video.
There are 4 main barriers to why a child cannot participate in society. They are poverty, lack of education, any form of disability, and unfortunately, in our type of environment, female gender. And many of the children that come to HRDC have all 4 of them, the female children, or 3 of them. By intervening in disability, you can empower them to address the other barriers. For example, a child who could not walk before, if you make them walk, they can go to school. If they go to school, they will address the other barrier, they will get an education. If they get an education, they'll earn a livelihood, And if they earn a livelihood, they will be, as opposed to their family supporting them, they will be supporting their family. And they will start contributing to society. And eventually, their example will also help change social stigma and gender biases, So all of these interplay with each other. We specialize in treating disability, but like I said, when you treat a child's disability, it is not straightening the bones, it's straightening the being, the human being, you know. And then you see the parents. You are converting a hopeless situation into a very hopeful situation. You are giving them dignity.
Earlier, I couldn't walk straight due to my condition. I had to walk on all 4 limbs. I would be alone at home. I couldn't attend school nor go around with my friends. After my treatment, I could now walk around and look at people straight. I am now able to hang around with my friends and also attend school like others. I am very happy now.
Reflecting back for over 4 or 5 decades of professional life, I think I have made the best decision, and I am a extremely satisfied, individual. And I thank everybody who has pitched in and helped us out to come this far. I think the future of HRDC is very, very bright. My father started this hospital 38 years ago. He was one doctor and he had 35 staff. Now we are more than 30 of us, doctors specialized in various streams of children's orthopedics. The program has expanded to various parts of the country. Every year, about 150 days of work is done in the field through our mobile clinics. Well, my dream is kind of realized, There is a young, very professional, competent generation of doctors who are running the show. From one person, it has become a big team, and they are very capable. And my dream is that this work just go on and help more and more children. My dream is that, this kind of service be available to every child who needs it, This is the dream with which my father started this institution in 1985. And we've come a long ways since then. But we know that there are still many, many children who are in need of our services. And I hope a day will come when each one of them can avail of these services and, we can better their lives. So more kids, more service. I mean, that's my dream.
In the podcast version, you probably didn't see or hear anything, but Dr. Banskota, he came to America to get his medical training. Mm-hmm. And, he's an older man now. He decided to go back to Nepal and basically start something from nothing. Yeah. And I could see as a spiritual teacher myself, and as someone who I like to look into the eyes of spiritual teachers and people who are doing good work in the world and listen to the tenor of their voice and listen to the reciprocity at which, like the vibration that they're operating at. And why I was so moved was I felt from him that the benefits that he had received by, he probably could have stayed in America, had a nice life, brought his kids up here, made a lot of money, been a doctor here, and instead he didn't just go back to Nepal. He built, something incredible. Now they have these outreach centers, and I could just see that he was at such a deep level of peace within himself. to the point of I'm looking for that kind of peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I'd be curious, Chris, maybe you could share about the karmic side of this from both a Buddhist perspective, and maybe you can also share why you're the one who brought us here. So tell us why is this, do you think, important to you now, this kind of karma yoga?
Yeah, in much of the South Asian, East Asian, many cultures that have been impacted by the belief in rebirth and karma, where that's sort of a fabric of the view of how people see their place in the world, see each other, see sort of the larger cosmology of or ontology of being in the world in a certain way. Karma is a big part of these worldviews, especially in some of the Central and South Asian cultural traditions, and I'm not just going to say religious traditions, but cultural traditions, where, the deeds of past lives often then will translate into future lives as far as situation, how one is reborn. And, that, as whether we believe in karma or not, it does have very deep impact on how people see the misfortune of others in many of these places. And so that can easily become a default to not do anything that is compassionate service, right? To attend to the troubles of others. And that's not to say that everyone is like this, but it is part of the fabric as well. Now, compassion, I think, to your question about that, is really, if you look at the definition of compassion, it means to suffer with. And that's an area that often is, in the spiritual traditions, at the center of karma yoga, as you put it, service in the world. So, for example, in Buddhism, the motivation to be of benefit to others is a fundamental cultivation practice. And it's also at the heart of karuna, the word compassion, is at the heart of many Hindu traditions as well. So there can be this dichotomy where there's this ideal, there's this etheric sense of what it means to be compassionate, and then what happens on the ground. And sometimes those two things don't match up. Yeah. So really being able to bring those things together, I feel like Dr. Banskota, Ashok, and his son Bibek really embody the heart of that union. The union of really being moved, as Andrew, you've been moved, as I was moved, clearly as Eileen has been moved in her work with Partners Asia. And I mean, he is like this quintessential example of, as you put it, also this grassroots following a calling. At HDS, at Harvard Divinity School, we have this notion of a calling. And a lot of our students will end up sort of living into their call, but not knowing where it's leading. But I feel like Dr. Banskota had a very wholesome and almost a very clear sense of something that needed to be attended to in these marginalized children from very poor families. And I think the film does such a beautiful job that I was moved by it too. That's one of the areas that got me really committed in the same way of wanting to be involved.
I think when we see someone who's really on a mission, we want to help. Like, we're like, oh, this is, it's like, okay, the Red Cross, there's a million foundations, but sometimes when we see that alignment between purpose and personal dharma, I just think it draws energy to it. I'm curious, Eileen, like, what was the moment for you? I mean, you've been doing, maybe you can talk a little bit about your story too. I mean, you've been doing work in the world of NGOs and stuff for a long time.
Yeah.
What was the moment that brought you into Sabal, and maybe share a little more about your story?
Sure. So I've been supporting kind of local leaders and grassroots organizations in South and Southeast Asia for 27 years. I started in 1997, and I was working with a number of organizations. So, and it's really like the goal was to reach the people who were most marginalized and who had no one else.
Just take us there. What brought you there? Why were you? Was it why? Like, take us there. 27 years ago? What were you doing? You know.
Well, I went trekking.
Okay, you went to trek. You started as a trek.
Trekking 30 years ago, and in the Everest area, and I just fell in love with the country. I mean, there's something about the culture, the people. There's a sense there that I had never experienced before in the world, and I really fell in love with it. So I had the chance to join. It was only going to be for 1 year. I was just finishing up a post-baccalaureate pre-med program at Harvard.
So you were doing a pre-med post-bac, and then you're like, oh, for 1 year I'll hike in the mountains, and then what happened?
So I was offered a position as a director of programs for 1 year.
Okay.
And I, it was working in Nepal. It was working in with Tibetan nomads inside Tibet and India.
Oh, cool.
And I just fell in love with it, and it was really just figuring out how to partner with these leaders that are often, that's when I met Dr. Banskota. And I had the very same experience of him that you guys both have had from watching the film. He has such integrity. He is deeply compassionate. He has a vision that I think brings everyone's energy kind of in better alignment. So
any good stories that you can give us a vignette, like take us to Nepal. I mean, first of all, it's so different physically, right? Just mountain. Take us there, could you? And do you have a good story? Anything jumping out at you? Like, you have a story to share with us?
I mean, the stories that I have of Dr. Banskota is just how he is so present that when you're with him, you feel like you're the only person kind of in existence. He's so present and interested and really funny. But he's that way with everyone. They call him Ba, which means father in Nepali, and it's the staff calls him Ba. The kids do, the kids will come and hug his leg, and they just love him. I mean, there's like such and
that's such a. Can you imagine a hospital in America where everyone calls the head doctor father? I mean, like we need good fathers, we need that. We need that. There's so much like kind of the patriarchy and all this. It's like, but when the father is doing right, it's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, please continue. So they're all calling him Ba. That's us, so beloved.
Even when they send me photos from Nepal now, they'll have, Ba, that's called, Ba at rounds, pictures of him doing the rounds, or Ba at a mobile medical camp.
What do they call his son? Because now his son is kind of taking over, right? His son is... Yeah.
He's running the day-to-day. I don't think he has a name quite yet like that,
No.
But I wouldn't be surprised if he grows into that.
He's got to earn it. I'm very attuned to like... I mean, look at when you watch the video, and I hope everyone, again, click on the link below, watch the video. You'll see the children that they're helping, and they're obviously extremely, it's just very heartwarming and wonderful. I, though, was really attuned to Dr. Banskota and his son. I mean, his son's probably my age. I'm assuming he's in his 40s. He also is obviously educated, became a doctor. Mm-hmm. But it's clear that he made a decision at a certain point to follow his own father's footsteps, which is rare in the world, And I could almost see him starting to get the benefits. Like in the Taoist tradition, we say that an enlightened person receives the benefits of heaven. That's not money, fame, fortune. It's the when you get the hug, the little child hugging your leg, calling you Ba. That's like a boon that you can't describe. That's a type of wholesomeness that, like, cultivating wholesome states of consciousness, and I just think that if that work is happening anywhere in the world, we should support it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, have the two of you, like, is it, I know it's just a video, but what's it like when you're there?
In Nepal?
Yeah. Is it like that?
It's, yeah. I feel elated every single time I go. And I've been there, I think 15 times.
Wow.
And it, the feeling that you get when you go into that hospital, you can't imagine. I mean, the kids have all kinds of apparatus and fixator rings and surgeries, and there is so much joy there. And the guardians, you can really get that feeling of deep joy. And the kids often, when they come, they have a counseling section in the hospital. They have counselors, because the kids are pretty traumatized when they first get there. A lot of them have been isolated, not accepted even within their families.
And most of them have like limb disfigurement. Like, maybe, actually, I have a curiosity about this.
Sure.
Is it more common? Like, are they coming because they have injured themselves and there's just no way to get treatments? Or is it that there's some kind of nutrient deficiency because they're so poor that it's causing their limbs to grow in a funny way? And like, has there been any, and like I didn't, and I wonder to myself, like, does this exist in America? Like, but we just don't have, or does it not exist here? Like, why is it happening so much over there? Why are these children having these issues? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's a number of things, Andrew. It's poverty is a really big factor, as well as there's a lack of infrastructure in the country. So the rural areas have, there's a lot of areas that have no health care whatsoever. And those tend to be extremely poor. It's really rugged. It's the Mount Everest, it's the Himalaya. Yeah. And, down into the Terai region, which is very close to India. So you get a whole mix of kind of poverty, lack of infrastructure, and malnutrition. So what happens is there's some congenital issues at play. There's clubfoot, but there's also about 30% of the kids that come in have received some kind of treatment, whether that's at a district hospital or with a shaman, and it just hasn't healed properly. So 30% are children who've had treatment that was not effective. There's a big congenital component. And then in the rural areas, they still use open fire in the kitchen. They cook over an open fire. And and the parents are out working in the fields. And so often you'll have siblings who are in charge of babies that are crawling, and then they will fall into the fire and get severely burned.
Wow.
So, and then, what happens is, even if they do get treatment, it's often not, it's not effective. Mm-hmm. And so the kids will get all these contractures as they grow. And so they do a lot of burn release and rehab for burns. So it's really a big mix.
How big is Nepal, like, compared to in the United States, like compared to like New York State? It's hard for me to imagine. Do you know?
It's not that big. It's kind of sandwiched between India and China.
Right.
Yeah, at an angle. It has close to 30 million people.
30 million, though, right.
Yeah, but that's the number. They're mostly concentrated in the Kathmandu Valley and Pokhara, so as you get up towards the Himalaya, it's, less densely populated, and down by India, it's more populated.
But what I thought was impressive is that, they have how many, like over 60 satellite centers. So Sabal Foundation has their hospital, their core hospital, and then they have all these satellite centers. I mean, that's a lot for one organization to do. Are they, I mean, what's the rest of the country's healthcare situation like? Is Sabal kind of like one of the major players in Nepal healthcare? So
they've developed this model organically, and they have the 100-bed hospital right outside Kathmandu. Then they have 4 satellite clinics, 2 in the Far East and 2 in the Far West. And then they have community-based rehabilitation workers. That's the 76. Okay. And they live all throughout Nepal.
And they do outreach too, right? They look for the kids and they...
Yeah. And they're really the glue of the organization, because these kids are often literally hidden away. Like the parents are afraid of them being abused. They often don't go to school, so they're hidden. And it's really these community-based rehabilitation workers who have local ties. They'll meet with the school, they'll meet with the health clinic, and then they're the ones that find the kids. And they initiate the conversations with the families, because some families are very reluctant to have their child treated because they don't want to mess with karma.
Right.
And so they start to form that relationship. And then the hospital sends out mobile medical camps throughout the whole country. They go to every district. And it's the community-based rehabilitation workers, they'll gather everyone. And depending on where they are, they can see, up to 200 children a day. And each child that comes gets evaluated, they get a treatment plan. Sometimes they'll get treated right in the camp, but the more severe ones will get a surgery date, and then they're brought to the hospital. And, for the poorest of the poor, the HRDC they give them bus fare, and, they'll get them to the hospital, the child and a guardian. So it's kind of this big circle.
It moves me to tears. Like, I just think about the people that are doing the work of, I think about like my company, like, oh, we have like outreach and sales, like it's like, but these people are doing, I imagine the work, not just of the Dr. Banskota and his son, but the work of all of these field agents, that has to be so rewarding too, but also so challenging. And does the money that we raise where does it go as far as supporting the staff, and how much of it, like how do you distribute the funds? Like how does all that work?
Yeah. So we are a U.S. nonprofit, Sabal is, and we're extremely lucky that we have a benefactor who covers all of our operating costs.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, we're very lucky. And so whatever funds we raise gets wired directly to the hospital.
Okay, you have a benefactor that covers American costs, not all the costs of the work in Kathmandu. No, that's got it. So anything though that you raise will go directly to Kathmandu with nothing taken out. That's amazing.
Yeah, and the way that they operate. First of all, last year they did more than 2,200 surgeries, and they treated more than 22,000 kids throughout the country. And they did it for $1.8 million. So they are incredibly efficient.
Wow.
And they look for every single possible way of stretching that rupee a little bit further. So they have organic gardens that produce food for the hospital and the staff. It's great organic food. They have a prosthetic orthotic lab that literally manufactures all of like a prosthetic leg can cost $98, or a body brace they can make for $60. And so, they make that for the kids in the hospital. The community-based rehab workers take measurements and send it in, and then they'll create whatever device is needed, and it goes out with the mobile medical clinic camps. And I mean, it's just
Doesn't it make you feel a little ashamed of how much we charge for everything over here and how we live? I'm serious. It's like,
if I can jump in as well, going back to something that you mentioned, Andrew, about the karma, and that is, well, it's not just the karma, but we have this term, in social justice work called intersectionality. And largely what that means is that there are multiple layers at play. In this case, for these children who don't have access to an education, much less the health, the treatment for their disabilities. There's also a gender component for girls as opposed to boys. And then we have a caste system that also tends to just sort of categorically marginalize people in a certain category of the population, and how stigmatizing on top of that.
That's true institutional, like still a system of institutional repression. Like truly, it's right. The caste system exists there.
And it's a global thing. I mean, we find this in different manifestations in different cultures. But here, I think what's so interesting too, in addition to the medical treatment, is kind of that the Banskotas, the Ashok and Bibek, and their team have created and instituted something that really is transcending a lot of those limitations. And I think that includes educating these children, and saying, whether they're a boy or a girl, or they're poor, if they can't pay, whatever the belief in the karma is, these are all our children and they all have a right to a future. And just with that one kind of approach, we're breaking through all of these sort of stigmatizing categories, without some of the barriers that we might have, even in a developed society like the US, right? Where everything is so political and everything is so mired in protocol and in like our healthcare system, education, things that really depend on what happens in Washington, D.C., or, sort of sponsorship by certain corporations with an agenda. But here, this is like the jewel at the center of the lotus that is just flourishing because just fundamentally from compassion. And so it's such a unique, unusual example of what is possible, just because of a love of this man for these children that really need a chance at life. And he did it anyway. Here, if we wanted to do that here, there can be all kinds of reasons why.
It'd be very hard.
And the complexity shuts down the motivation of people to want to do something. But here we have something that is really sort of clean and clear. And that's why I was moved also when I learned about HRDC, to say we have to do something to really support not just kind of the vision of Ashok and Bibek Banskota, but really for humanity. This is an example.
Because it's an example. It's an example of healing an area that needs deep healing, and it's an example that's successful, that's working. So, I mean, look at there's war in the Middle East right now. There's war in Russia and the Ukraine. And these are areas that are going to need they're going to be devastated. I mean, turning into third world in certain,
they are cases. Devastated. Yeah. It's already happened.
I mean, when it's time to clean up, when it's time to, when the bombs are done, I don't know, that's so depressing to even talk about, but at some, when you take a bigger view of the whole world, there's places in the world that are moving into, in cycles, right? Where empires rise and fall, where places get destroyed and then reborn. And this is a place that has seen some hard times. Obviously, it's stuck between two major powers, India and China. I don't know if Eileen, you can speak to this, to the political issues that are there, but I imagine that Dr. Banskota would have some clout now because of what he's doing.
Yeah.
But what do you think about anyway, I just think we might as well give to something like that. Like that's where the light is right now.
Yeah.
There's like giving to something like in Gaza or in the Ukraine, there's so much darkness. We don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Anyway, please go ahead.
At one point I decided, because I've known Dr. Banskota for 27 years, and I've just seen I've seen the numbers grow. And so I decided to kind of chart what was happening politically in the country against the number of kids that are being treated. And it was super interesting because, Nepal went through a civil war for 17 years.
When was that?
That was, gosh, I don't know the dates, but
okay, we'll get it. That's okay. We'll figure it out.
I'll come back to that.
That's all right.
They're still kind of coming out of it. It ended about 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But during that time, I think 17,000 people were killed, and it was a very, very chaotic time in the country.
1996 to 2006, according to
there we go.
10 years.
Yeah.
According to Wikipedia.
10 years, yeah, and 17,000 people were killed. So during that time, Dr. Banskota continued to build the organization. And he, started doing health camps, and the numbers of kids has continued to rise. The only dip was at COVID, but the numbers are back up.
Was the civil war between like an Indian supported group and a Chinese supported group, or what was it related to?
Nepal has a tradition of monarchy, and there was some unrest with the Maoists and all these different political coalitions, and the monarchy was finally overthrown. And
Got it.
A year prior, the king and queen and family were massacred. So it was a very tumultuous time for them politically.
But it's now ruled by the Communist Party, essentially, correct?
No, it is. They have a constitution, and they do have elections and a parliamentary system.
Okay.
But it's still, there's a lot of political tension and chaos in the country.
Got it.
If I can also jump in here, if that's okay, Andrew.
Please,
okay.
You don't need to just jump in.
All right, I'm jumping in. That's what we have to do in my family.
You have to ask permission, man. You didn't grow up in my household. We just yelled over each other.
All right, I'll start yelling if I have to. You said something that really I think was the heart of the matter for me, and you said that's where the light is right now. Given notwithstanding Nepal's own political history and civil war, and what we're experiencing in the U.S. with the political rhetoric, what we can call intractable problems, the seemingly intractable problems. Here you have this person, given what's happening not just here, but also in Gaza, as you mentioned, Ukraine. I mean, you have these places of extreme violence and oppression and all of that. And here is this organization and this team of people led by the Banskotas.
And Eileen on this call.
Eileen,
right now.
absolutely, the work that she's been doing.
We've not given her enough credit, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And it's this soft burning candle that is just almost keeping the flame alive for our humanity in the midst of all this other stuff. And it's focused on local leadership. HRDC really focused on local leadership and local change makers, despite what else is happening. And when I learned about this, that was my sense, Andrew, was there is light happening here in this area for these children. And it's another example of how what has sustained humanity since the very beginning. It's not violence, war, control, oppression, but it's love. This is what has, I think, kept humanity proliferating and flourishing wherever it's flourishing, even if flourishing isn't actively happening in the midst of oppression and stigma. this is what we need. This is where the light is. So I'm glad you framed it that way, because that's certainly how I experienced it when I learned about this, and why it's so important for us to pay attention to what they're doing, and not just support the children, but learn from how they have gone about creating this amazing jewel at the heart of the lotus, so that we know what's possible to do at other places around the world. And that would include places like Gaza and Ukraine, places that are really going to need and do need help, from other places where the problems feel intractable. Yeah.
It's interesting. As a historian of Korean spiritual practices, and that's my background, Eileen, a lot of people don't know that, there was if we look back about 100 years ago, between World War I and World War II, there was a huge movement around the world of nonviolent resistance, and leaders like, in Korea, in South Korea, before Gandhi was doing nonviolent satyagraha, there was a movement called Manse, which was there was nonviolent resistance against Japanese occupation in South Korea, or in Korea. It wasn't South and North at the time, and then that there was the beginning of the international, like, oh, they're doing that over there. Oh, interesting. And this is maybe working as a way. And then Gandhi's work in South Africa, and then his work in India, and how that influenced Dr. King in America. And those movements that were like, it's clear that spiritual truth and light was on the side of, a certain way of being. Like, they weren't trying to fight fire with fire. They were fighting it with love. Yeah. I don't think we've seen that in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't think that exists now. Right now, it's all, no, we're going to fight with fire.
Yeah.
We're going to fight fire with fire. And that's where the world is at. We're fighting fire with fire. All the activists have gone that direction, at least the ones that I know.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to get Dr. Banskota later. Maybe we could get him on the podcast, or maybe bring him to America at some point if he ever comes to visit. Because he's one of the first people I've seen in a while that I feel like is fighting only with light.
Yeah.
And I encourage people to look at their website, and even you can just see by the photos and it's so not contrived.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Our last talk, Eileen, with me and Chris, was about the yugas and about how the world goes through times on fire, and how there are cycles, of violence and of peace. And I wonder what cycle we're approaching. I guess maybe we could kind of close things by, Chris, do you want to share about the benefit concert that you're going to do for Sabal? And Eileen, maybe if you have any last thoughts that you want to share before we finish. Go ahead.
Thank you, Andrew, also for making the space, for letting people know about HRDC, and also the benefit concert we're doing on October 26th. It's a Saturday evening, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And for me, Satigata, my band that we played at the Berkshire Yoga Festival this year, we've done a number of fundraisers, largely because the power of music to move the spirit, if you will, although in Buddhism we don't recognize a spirit, the spirit of love, of compassion, is really powerful during a time where, so much language and rhetoric is divisive around so many things. And music unifies everybody, I think. We all feel through the sensory body what music can do. And it's not just obviously our music, although I like our music. We're also going to have a brilliant musician, Shyam Nepali, who is a saranga player. He's one of the world's foremost saranga players and teachers, who, by the way, has played with Krishna Das, who I think is going to be at the Berkeley Yoga Festival. Can we say that on here?
Well, we just did, so now we did. Yeah, Krishna Das is going to be headlining the opening night at the festival.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And maybe I really do want to reach out to Shyam. Like his Nepalese. It's like the instrument is like a string. It's almost like a mixture between an upright bass and I don't know. How would you describe the sound?
Yeah, I mean it's like a what we call it, a viola, or like a sort of a smaller cello with three or four strings that he plays with a bow. And it
has a different vibration. It has it has the vibration that takes you into a more spiritually grounded place.
And he's also he's also an innovator. So he'll be playing as well. So Sadigata and we'll play. Shyam is also bringing some musicians. There's going to be some food, some light snacks, but really it's to raise money for these children and for the work of the Banskotas. There's a sponsorship. Somebody can choose to be a sponsor by donating any number of, I think, 3 or 4 different tiers of sponsorship, but also buying tickets. It's going to be a wonderful evening of music. There'll be dance, there'll be celebration, and we're going to screen the 10-minute documentary that Eileen produced, I believe. It's amazing. It's the film that moved you, Andrew, I believe, and it moved me when I saw it. And it's really quite profound, and it captures things so beautifully. So we're going to do that as well. I think
and that's where is that located? Where, at Harvard in Cambridge, or where?
That's going to be at the Cambridge Friends Meeting House, the Quaker Meeting House in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
And we'll have a link to that in the show notes for anyone who's interested. And just give us the dates one more time.
Sure. It's Saturday, October 26th, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. We're really excited to keep selling tickets. And so we want to really encourage people, even if you can't come in person, you can still buy tickets and give them as
Are you gonna Zoom, or are you gonna make it?
It's not going to be hybrid. We really want this to be something where people come and feel the full sensory experience of being in person. So.
All right. Well, I got 5 more minutes at max. Eileen, anything that you want to share that maybe we didn't get to, or any last words for us about your work, or maybe a story that is maybe meaningful to you want to share?
Well, I've been doing this for 27 years, and I have very few heroes in my life, and I've been really privileged to support hundreds of grassroots leaders. And I really resonates with me when you talk about Dr. Banskota. He is one of my heroes. And I think it's just the very thing that we're talking about is he started with seemingly an impossible situation, and he's just continued to grow it and with a very, very deep compassion. And yes, it takes incredible skill to be an orthopedic surgeon and a teacher, which he's done throughout his whole career. But he's had that vision and that compassion that it's impacted me in my life. And I know that it impacts everyone that's able to go there. And it's thrilling for me to have both of your reactions to seeing the film. So I'm just very grateful.
Yeah. How I would say, what do you think is the deepest spiritual lesson you've received from this 25 plus year journey you've been on? How does it for your own personal development?
Yeah. Well, I think it comes down to something very simple that Dr. Banskota often says is he's satisfied in his life because he's given back more than he's taken. And it's a very simple kind of barometer. It's very simple. And where I've come to is, for me, compassion is not a noun. It's not something that people have inside. It's a verb. It's an activity.
Yeah.
And it's that dialectical. It's that very activity that it transforms, that it produces compassion, and it affects not only the beneficiary, it affects everyone participating. And so I've had that experience with Dr. Banskota every single time, every conversation, every trip, is that I feel transformed. So
that is the best. I love ending on that. Like, this is a question for you, the listeners, you, the watcher. Have you given more than you've received? Have you given? And if not, what do you want to do about that? Yeah, it's a beautiful lesson. I thank you so much, Eileen. Chris, thank you for bringing this to my attention. And I think this is a really cool opportunity. We'll put all the links in the show notes that we discussed. You can there'll be a link to the Sabal Foundation's website where you can make donations directly. I'll be making a donation, or Dregs, our company, will be making a donation, and we'll be sharing this with the Berkshire Yoga Festival community. Chris will be back at the Berkshire Yoga Festival this summer, giving his lectures on various topics related to Buddhism and enlightenment, psychedelics, and all kinds of cool stuff. And Eileen, hopefully we're going to see you there too.
But I'm not bringing psychedelics with me.
No, well, you don't have to bring them. We're gonna.
Oh,
we found.
You found someone.
Well, there actually are. There's a certain number of them that are perfectly legal, apparently. That we'll do another podcast where we talk about what you're going to teach next year at the festival,
Okay.
Chris.
Sounds good.
And then you and I just have to have a hang, and we'll chat. All right. This has been a real pleasure. I think we're going to end it. So peace, peace, peace. Blessings to everyone. And Scott will take us.